Welcome to Stories with Steve, a podcast on the Central Buna Podcast Network. Every Thursday in 5 minutes or less, we'll lift you up with stories of how God works behind the scenes in our lives. Romans 8:28 tells us that God works all things together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. Now with an encouraging story, here's Steve.
You know, we just got through celebrating Easter, the resurrection, and one of the things Jesus said before he was resurrected, he told us to go into all the world and preach the gospel, to share the good news of salvation. And I have to admit that when I was younger, I was a lot better about that than I am today. I look back at my life and how the Lord allowed me to come across certain people and how he used me. I remember back in college, there was a young man. He was a Japanese student, a foreign student, and he was going to college. And we were playing tennis there. And this guy had not ever been exposed to Christianity at all. Probably raised Buddhist, I think, but he didn't really know who Jesus is. We just don't realize there are people that literally don't know who Jesus is. And we were just sharing right there on the tennis court. And I just shared it with him and asked him if he would like to accept Jesus Christ, and what he did for him. And to my surprise, right there, and he was so open that he accepted the Lord right there on the tennis courts at the college. And I was just so amazed that how God opened up that opportunity. Well, fast forward, that semester, he didn't come back. He went back home to Japan. But I always wondered, I guess this is my doubting nature. I wonder if I didn't explain it right to him, if he really understood, that he said a prayer, but he didn't really understand. And I thought, Lord, if I could just have a sign or something. Well, one day in the P.O. box there at the college, I got a postcard. If anybody remembers postcards, they used to be popular, real short. And all he said was something like, "Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for talking to me. I really feel like I'm born again." And I took that as a confirmation that the Lord did, touch his heart. And, it's great when people are open like that, but people aren't always that open, right? Sometimes we should expect opposition to people. Some people get pretty obstinate when we try to share our faith. I remember there was a guy, I might have been back in high school, that he came over to the house, and I believe he was a Vietnam vet. But anyway, I began to open up and share it with him, and this guy was just, man, he was so, like he had a big wall up. Everything I said, he tried to shoot down, and I sensed that he was an atheist. He didn't believe in God at all, and because of this and that, and he was arguing. It's so funny when you talk about atheists. One of the things I've observed is they're not that they don't believe in God. It's almost like they're mad at God, because you hear them talk. They go, "Well, then why does God do this? Why does God do that?" And I'm like, wait a second, I thought you didn't believe in God, right? So, but anyway, this guy, and so it was one of those things. I thought I was an epic fail, like I wasn't good at sharing my faith. Well, fast forward a few months, maybe a year later, I'm in a men's group at a church, and a guy gets up to speak, and he shares his testimony, how God changed his life. And I'm looking at this guy, I'm going, man, do I know this guy from somewhere? He looks familiar, but he looks different too. And then it hit me. That was the guy that I talked to that night. That was him. And I was just like, whoa. And I walked up afterwards and said, "Hey, do you remember me over at the house that night?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, I remember," and talked about stuff that happened in his life. And I just look at it this way, that maybe I planted a seed that night in his heart. Maybe other people, watered the seed. But it was so beautiful to see how God transformed. His whole countenance looked different. And that's the beauty of the gospel. The great thing is we don't have to force people, coerce people. All we have to do is share, and then God let the Holy Spirit, he's the one that saves and draws people. Another experience I had when I was worked in Christian radio in Houston. A lot of times at night, when you work at night, you have a lot of young people call you up, particularly young teenagers, teenage girls. And I remember this vividly because it was Valentine's Day, Valentine's night. And a young lady called me up, like a lot of them, and just want to talk. I think they think it's cool to talk to a DJ or something. But she was just talking. She began to share how she's just struggled with believing in God and all that. Well, come to find out, she was a victim of one of the school shootings that had happened, and she survived. And so I just told her, you know what? The fact that we're talking right now is a miracle. You're a miracle. God spared you, but not some of your classmates, for a reason. and he led you to this point, you know. Anyway, she opened her heart that night, and we prayed, and she accepted the Lord. And I just think about that was just divine timing and all that. And I share all that not to myself, but for us, that sometimes we just need to ask the Lord to send us those opportunities. Right, He will. There's people that are ready, and some people, we may not see the results, but that's okay, because it's God's the one that works in our hearts. All He wants us to do is to share the word with people, and so that's what we're called to do. We all got a story to tell. Matter of fact, our testimony is our story. Nobody can really argue with that, right? They can argue about everything else. I don't believe in it, but they can't argue what's happening in our lives. And so that's what I always say. Remember, you've got a story to tell.